Welcome to Chat Cyber, a podcast on all things cyber policy where we explore key issues and discuss policy strategies with industry experts.
Hello and welcome to Chat Cyber, Cyber Florida's policy podcast. I'm your host, James Jacobs, Cyber Florida's Associate Director for Partnerships and Policy.
I am the co-host, Jordan Deulis. I am our policy analyst.
We'd like to thank you for tuning in to our first episode of Chat
CYBR, Chat Cyber. We have the almost good Dr. Brian Fonseca with us today as our first guest. We really appreciate you coming on and being our guinea pig. Brian and I met probably about 6 months ago, and I already count him among some of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So we're very happy he's here today to talk AI.
You just lost all credibility. All credibility. No, I'm kidding. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Can you believe they gave me my own podcast?
I love it. I love it.
This is already just like, what is this guy doing?
Now, to give a little bit on your background, Brian is currently the director of the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy at Florida International University. He is also the founding executive director of cybersecurity at FIU and serves as a cybersecurity policy fellow and international security fellow at the DC-based think tank New America. Prior to his employment at FIU, Brian served as the senior research manager for sociocultural analysis at United States Southern Command's Joint Intelligence Operations Center South, and before that served 8 years in the United States Marine Corps. So thank you for joining us today. You have a very impressive background. We appreciate you being here.
None of that is true. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. Thank you. And again, it's an honor to be here with you guys talking about, such an important, consequential topic.
Yes, artificial intelligence.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So the topic of the hour. So
I think it's going to be the topic of the century. Mm-hmm. I think the impact that AI is going to have is just going to be so consequential and so pervasive at the same time that we're going to be talking about AI for a long time.
Absolutely.
So our first segment we'd like to do with you, it is the term of the hour. We have a little segment called Explain It to James, and explain it as if you were explaining it to a child. If you had to explain AI, Brian, how would you explain it?
Okay, is this James' child or is this like a normal child?
This is me as like...
There's a difference.
This is, you're going to want to dumb it down to where someone with a redneck accent can understand.
Oh, Barney style, as we used to say.
That's what we're
the purple dinosaur. Okay, no. So look, what is AI, artificial intelligence? It is intelligent machines, right? The concept of AI, by the way, is not new. We're talking about the 1950s in which the science was there in terms of the ability to make machines smart. In other words, give machines the ability to both think, process, and in some cases make decisions, mimicking sort of human cognition as well. So, imagine, Jordan, that James is a robot. I know sometimes that's probably not hard to imagine, but James is a robot.
Not a stretch.
But as a robot, James can be taught. He can be fed information that then he could cognitively or process in terms of thinking, and then spit out some type of output. That's what machine intelligence is. That's what AI is. It is, again, the ability to give machines some type of cognitive capacity, give them the data to use, to think and process, and of course put out something on the other end, which might be analysis. It might be the ability to perform a particular function, which is what we see it most often used today. But that's what AI is, sort of dumbed down. It is a machine that has the ability to think and process information.
Mm-hmm. Now, this being a policy podcast, I'm going to just kind of dive right into it. In your opinion, what are the different issues that policymakers should be considering when thinking about AI? I know it's a huge topic right now.
There's a long list of issues. I'll talk about some of the top issues that I think are important. Obviously, the first one, we're doing this podcast. This is representatives from two universities, right? And so, first and foremost, I have to talk about the workforce. There is going to be a tectonic shift in the job market and in the workforce in terms of the types of skills that are needed to perform not just the jobs of the futures, but the jobs that we're walking into right now. And so I think among the most important is the cultivation of a workforce that can adapt to the changes that are occurring as a result of AI and AI's impact on just about every facet of society. And the reason why I think that's really important is if you can imagine workforces that aren't adapting, right, and sort of find themselves struggling, to be employed. What does that do for the economy? What does that do for stability, conflict, right? And so I think we have to ensure that that workforces are prepared to take on the jobs that are going to be sort of disrupted or born out of the AI revolution. So I think workforce is certainly at the top of my list. That's something we do, a lot with at the university, is focusing on cultivating the skills of the future. Obviously, the second, I think, is, and maybe this isn't in any particular order, but just sort of off the top of my mind, the second is security. Right? If you're going to integrate AI into every facet of society, how are you ensuring that it is done in a secure way, an accountable way, a responsible way? And that's not even talking or going deep into the concept of adversarial AI, where we might find machine versus machine, right? And in the context of cyber, you're starting to see that already, right? Where you now have the ability to automate functions like penetration testing. You can automate, imagine the ability to automate vulnerability testing and patching of systems. In other words, machines could identify vulnerabilities in systems in real time and patch immediately without ever needing a human in the loop to press patch, right? And at the same time, you have automated viruses that are just working that machine persistently to find the vulnerabilities that the other machine hasn't yet found and patched. And so, you're going to see adversarial AI becoming an important part of the security conversation going forward. So I think security, I think workforce is important. I also think, we'll get to issues around like data privacy, right? Data integrity. How do we ensure that data is reliable, is comprehensive? So, and this also has the ability to produce, things like computational bias, right? In which machines, what comes out of machines is not reflective of reality. Rather, it's built on biased or bad information.
It's garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. That's right. And so imagine a data set that is going to help train a model to perform a task. If that data set is not reliable, is not complete, has issues, then it will undermine the ability of that machine to perform the task accurately or produce an analysis that is fair, just, equitable. And so, we're having lots of conversations around ethics and AI usage.
And that's all part of the data integrity.
The data integrity piece, that's right.
Can you expand a little bit more on what you mean by data security in the context of AI?
Yeah, privacy.
Privacy, yeah.
Machines require massive amounts of data to be trained. Most machines anyway need massive amounts of data to be trained properly to serve broad functions. And since data is so important, then you're also vulnerable to compromising data of individuals that may not want that data out there, right? And so machines adapt to. So they're collecting on us all day. If you haven't, I'm not sure I know anyone who has read those very long disclaimers and applications about the collection of your data. So that
take it all. I don't have time to read this.
Maybe I've done that a time or two or more or all the time. But that's part of it, is that at the end of the day, a lot of that collection of data is to better inform the machines or the adaptability of the technology to your personalized experience. And so how do we safeguard and secure that? How do we ensure that doesn't get out there and is now used for nefarious reasons, right? And which, bad guys are using that data to try to scam or take, things from you that are of value. So I think the data integrity, data security piece is also a really critical piece of this whole AI discussion, and why we have to think about the legislation or the guardrails that we keep, as keeps coming up, guardrails that ensure that we're safeguarding that safety, that we're bringing in ethical AI, responsible AI, accountable. It's got to be accountable. Anyway, those are some of the things that kind of pop off the top of my head. There's lots more issues, not issues, but challenges that we have to think meaningfully about in order to put proper policy in place to safeguard from the bad, but embrace the good at the same time.
You and I have talked offline about data governance. Can you speak a little bit to that, as far as, we're talking about policymakers at various different levels of government, different decision makers. Who has access to give AI authority in what situations when it's deployed, and what authority does AI have? How do you even begin to unravel that?
No, the governance piece is huge, because it's not just about giving the machines the authority, it's also about the ability to take the machines down if they're not being used for their intended consequences? And who governs that space? Who has the ability to say, company X, the AI that you've deployed for this purpose is being used for another purpose that we think undermines our policy,
And who's accountable for that?
and who's accountable.
Right.
So the governance piece and the accountability piece, and if you look at the executive order that came out of the White House late last year, so much of it was focused on accountability. Like, who is held accountable?
Yeah.
How do we enforce that accountability? These are, fundamental policy questions that we have to grapple with. And I think we have to get right. It's going to be much more harder I think much more difficult to evolve those. I think we have to put some real thoughtfulness in building that policy. And the policy is going to have to evolve. Why? Because the technological landscape is evolving faster. I was talking to my students last night where I was saying, hey, you don't remember the 8-track, do you? But I went from the 8-track to the cassette tape, to CDs, to USBs, to now, I don't need anything other than the internet to listen to music and some headphones. And I said, the time distance between that evolution was years. That's not the same today.
You were around for the 8-track?
I was around for the 8-track. I was so frustrated.
This guy was good for his age. I didn't even catch the 8-track.
You had to pull it out, fast forward if you wanted to hear the song again. There was no rewind. Anyway, I remember that's old school stuff.
So you had to go all the way back around?
You had to go all the way back around. There's only fast forward on those things.
That's so interesting.
Am I that old? Wow.
You look good for your age.
But again, the point I'm making here, which I think is important, is that the pace of tech evolution is happening far more rapidly than we experienced before. And so our laws have to keep pace with that. So I don't think you're going to be able to establish some comprehensive overarching solution to fix everything. You're going to have a variety of horizontal policy and vertical policy. And what I mean by that is horizontal policy is you're going to have policy that's sort of consistent across a variety of different verticals or themes, right? And then you have policy that's very specific.
Sure.
To an industry, for example. And so that's how we're thinking about the landscape. But that sort of tech evolution is going to be very demanding on our policy, which means we have to have agile policy, and we have to have policy that has the ability to continue to evolve and adapt to a changing technological landscape.
So I want to get Jordan in here. I'm stealing all the thunder here, but as you can tell, Brian and I have had several conversations about this, and he's got me a little bit fascinated about it.
Absolutely.
At Cyber Florida, we've done a lot of work with critical infrastructure. We're running our critical infrastructure risk assessment. You talk about verticals, and you talk about policy that may have to be specifically tailored to a certain industry. When we talk about critical infrastructure, specifically in the state of Florida, what do you think the most immediate impacts what are the most immediate impacts AI will have, would you, let's say, in the next 5 years in that industry? What do they need to be thinking about? So, they being the individual utility and the policymakers that govern them, that regulate them.
Yeah, look, I think that that's why I say critical infrastructure is part of the security portfolio, and I think it's so important for us to, again, be thoughtful around the kind of policy we put in place, because we want to embrace what AI can unlock in terms of the ability to deliver better service, better quality of service, faster service to constituents, right? At the same time, in the rush to build that effectiveness, efficiency of services, we're adopting technology that we haven't yet fully understood or fully understand. And so when you think about the critical infrastructure space and you think about utilities, you pick your critical infrastructure, they're all thinking about how to adopt AI in impactful ways. So how are we managing that? How are we managing that? So I think that's part of the policy landscape that we have to work through. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's
super helpful. And then
Go ahead. I think that a huge topic that we've kind of seen lately is AI in academia. It's like K-12,
that's a perfect example. That's a great. I know where you're going. I know where you're going. I love it though. Let's have that conversation. I think we have been so wrong on it, but let's go.
Well, we're coming to you guys today. You'll be hearing this after the fact, of course, but we're coming to you from the inaugural AI Policy Summit, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of institutions represented here today having these conversations, but you and I have talked. Okay, how does this impact the classroom? And the immediate gut reaction that you hear from so many people, well, what's this going to do for academic integrity? But also have to understand we're now training students that this is going to exist in every facet of their lives and careers moving forward.
Yeah.
So stick our heads in the sand and say, well, we have to avoid AI at all costs.
Yeah.
We're not going to be turning out graduates that are capable of living in the modern world.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I know a lot of your opinions on this, but for the audience sake,
All
let's
right.
get into it, man. Let's go.
Thank you, OpenAI and ChatGPT for opening this Pandora's box, right? Because so much of the conversation is because there are concerns around, concepts of ethics and plagiarism, right? How are students leveraging, ChatGPT, for example, to write essays, and so the debate was ban it. Or embrace it, and so many defaulted to ban it, right?
Right.
We're going to ban it. And the reason I think that's wrong is I think we should be instead teaching our students how to embrace it responsibly, ethically, right?
It's not going away.
It's not going away. So you mentioned the PhD. I had a professor once, this is a few years ago. He says, you guys are so lucky now because you get to use computers to write your dissertation. And these computers can spell check for you and tell you that your grammar is off. And I didn't have that. I had to use a typewriter and whiteout. Remember whiteout? I had to use a little whiteout stick and retype it. And it was like, I'm using the tools I have today that you didn't have accessible. And so my experience is changing. And so how do you then assess things different? Is there more focus on the quality? So this is part of it. So you think about, and I'll give you an example of where I think, we have a professor that's doing it right. We have one of our faculty members, Dr. Agatha Caraballo, who teaches in the Department of Public Administration. One of the things that she started doing was requiring students that were going to use AI to also submit their prompts with their essays.
Smart.
Right? So she didn't ban it. She didn't say you can't use AI, which so many other faculty are doing. She's saying if you're going to use AI, I want to see the prompt, right? And I think that's healthy. So I think the point of that is that we have to start to evolve also in terms of how we assess students' ability to comprehend material. Again, my classes, maybe the essays aren't as assessed heavily as the oral presentations. So we're going to have to adapt to it. I think the ban it conversation is, as someone mentioned earlier in our discussions, the train's left the station. So, and I'll tell you that the Miami-Dade College president, she made a really good point today. She says, the minute you start banning these things, you've essentially have given up. You've thrown your hands in the air and you say, there's nothing we can do. We're gonna give up on this one, and we're just gonna put a ban in place. Instead of thinking thoughtfully around how to, embrace that sort of technological change in a healthy way. So that's we can go on if you want, but I think that in the context of education, universities need to think about how to give those skills to students across the disciplines. This is not a computer science issue. Mm-hmm. This is not a policy exclusive issue. This is a law, medicine, hospitality management, right. Sports, medicine, you name it, it's there. And so students need to be given those tools so that the digital literacy of our society is elevated to match the fact that we have technology in place that is going to make them far more efficient and effective in their jobs.
Well, even some of the questions in academic integrity that we've talked about, and I found it fascinating that you said your colleagues having them submit their prompt. You have to understand the concept on a critical level to even be able to prompt AI to give you a product that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So
and maybe 5 years from now, what we have, and by the way, we're at ChatGPT 4, I think 4.5, 4.5, 5 is going to come out soon. But if you talk to the scientists, the actual science is 4 or 5 generations ahead. We just don't have access to it yet, right? Maybe 3, 4 generations ahead. But at some point...
Is that a computing power problem?
Well, it's
Once again, explain it to James.
Yeah, yes, explain it to James. It is about computing power, speed, how sophisticated the algorithms are in terms of their computational capacity. And so, remember you're training these machines to think, and then you're giving them data and say, think, and then produce something, right? And that's what it is. The model is to, compute. to process information and to put an output that we can then use to make decisions or serve functions. And so that model is also increasingly changing to adapt to the information and new knowledge, and being sort of tightened in ways that it has even greater sophistication. Whereas this broad concept called singularity, right? At what point machines can process at the speed, if not faster than the human brain, right? That, they say we're still decades away from that. I hope we're decades away from that. But still, that's what it comes at. So these computing speed, the sort of critical thing, the computational power of these machines is increasing also. That's what I mean by sort of, generations being more sophisticated than what we have in ChatGPT. And what that means, going back to what you said, James, is that today you may need a far more sophisticated prompt to get a high quality result from something like ChatGPT, whereas in 5 years, you may not need that kind of sophistication because the machine has learned so much, the model has adapted so much that the output is improving, right? Because that's the other thing that you have to know about these machines is that, at least in terms of some machines' capabilities, particularly those that hold memory, right? That's part of the sort of one of the categorizations, how we might categorize machines is whether or not they can hold memory so that they continue to learn and adapt, right, over longer terms. And so that's all comprised in terms of, how powerful these machines are and their cognitive ability.
Cool. We want to be respectful of our listeners' time. We appreciate everybody tuning in, but I want one more bonus question here before I let Jordan take us out. I didn't even warn you that this one was coming.
Oh, boy.
Quantum computing paired with AI, if we can actually build a quantum computer, what does that do to the power of AI?
Well, what is quantum computing?
Explain it, James.
It's speed. It's speed. It's computing speed and power. It's processing speed and power. That's what, AI is going to be built on top of that speed. Right, and quantum computing, I don't think is a thing of the future, right? The science is there. Theoretically, I think we've got it. It's about now sort of. I read
the other day, IBM thinks they're 5 years or less away from a working quantum computer.
Right. So I think the science is there. I think it's now about the having it in place, and it's really going to be about speed, computing speed, which is crazy because we work on our processors now and we're like, it can't get any faster. And what does faster mean? Well, in computational context, speed allows you to process information a lot faster while maintaining the quality of the output, which I think is going to be interesting. So again, that convergence is undoubtedly going to happen once you hit quantum computing. AI and machines are going to be built on top of that computing power. And again, I'm a policy guy. I know enough of the hard science to be dangerous, and that's only because I spent a lot of time with my colleagues in computing and engineering. But again, from a policy perspective, there are implications even with speed, right, that we have to think about in terms of how that translates into legislation. Or more importantly, maybe a better way to cast it is how that shows up in the guardrails that we put in place to ensure accountability, right? To ensure responsibility, to hold ethical standards that ensure sort of equity, justice, fairness. I think that's what we're concerned about from a policy perspective.
Right.
Is how do we embrace this amazing technology that our folks in the engineering and hard sciences is developing in healthy, responsible, accountable ways.
Well, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly insightful and interesting conversation. We appreciate you joining us today and being our very first guest on Chat Cyber. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and the honor of being, I won't say number one, I would say guinea pig, because I think that's really what I was the guinea pig. And so I'm grateful for that.
Guinea pig you were.
I'm grateful for that opportunity. No, thank you. And it's, again, as a representative of FIU, I just want to say I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with Cyber Florida at USF. I mean, you guys are doing amazing work for the state, and we're really fortunate to be partners with you. So thank you.
Yeah, we are too. Thank you. We appreciate it.
All opinions expressed by the Chat Cyber podcast participants are their own and do not exclusively represent the views and opinions of Cyber Florida.